Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Noah Freeman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name's Joe Kuzma, and you may not recognize the fellow over here to my side. One Mr. Brian E. Roach is getting surgery. Nothing major, I guess. It's he's been talking about his wrist for weeks or whatever, and since he's posting it on social media, I'm sure I'm not violating any HIPAA laws. So, standing in his place here, someone that we've been trying to actually get on the show and who yelled at me for going solo last week because he was available, and I'm just like, hey, I didn't know your schedule. I'm sorry, man. Mr. Noah Freeman, who you've been here before, but it's been a while, and this is, I believe, your on-camera debut at least. So Noah, how's it going?
It's going well. I mean, you guys have been doing the camera thing for a little bit, but it's been a while since I've been on here, so it's good to be back. We're here to talk about basically some random stuff.
Yes.
And get through things that have been happening in the NFL.
Oh, I'm so annoyed, man. I don't know where to start. You know, I had like a checklist of things that were annoying me or not annoying me that happened since, our last episode. Brian got to speak with the legendary Captain Kirk, Levon Kirkland, so go back and check that interview out if you hadn't. Even though there's like a little bit of talk, pregame for the Super Bowl, it's mostly about Levon and his career. So speaking of Super Bowls, I think I don't know where to start with this. It's like there's so many narratives here, and people just can't correlate things with the Steelers. You got Bruce Arians and all this other stuff. I think the most annoying one, besides Antonio Brown, which we'll get to. Well, why don't we just talk about that first? My thoughts and feelings. All these people are like, oh, you're just haters. Oh, you're just, you got to be down on this guy. Do you really forget like how this went down? This isn't like the Steelers did Antonio Brown dirty in any way, and then he went to the very next team and stuck it right in their nose. He quit on the Steelers, demanded a trade, went to the Raiders, burned up his feet, was painting a helmet that was no longer legal to play with, showed up in a hot air balloon to training camp, but didn't practice because he had whatever he did with his feet, the cryogenic burning blister, whatever that was peeling. He mean mugged it up for the Hard Knocks film crew at HBO, and then basically got himself fired from the Raiders without ever making a penny on the contract he signed there, which he was definitely looking for more money. For years, you had always heard there was always smoke around the fire for rumors. The Steelers, Antonio Brown's looking for more money, this and that. And they gave it to him. Or they kicked something over that was due to him and made it bonus money. So he got paid, up front for that particular season. And for all intents and purposes, it just drives me crazy that people, one of these comments that I saw, well, let's go back. Raiders. He left the Raiders, and then, that was after vetoing they were going to trade him maybe to the Bills, who, likely had interest. They went after Stephon Diggs this past offseason. You saw how that worked out. So, goes from the Raiders, and then all of a sudden joins the Patriots season in progress, plays week 2, and then is off the team almost immediately because of all of his off-the-field shenanigans, any type of... I hate to get into too many of these things, but we'll just say off-field shenanigans as to not belabor some of this. And then he was saying, oh, I'm retired, I'm not playing. Well, for the stuff that happened off-field, he still got in trouble for it and had to serve a suspension. There were no teams that were really looking for him until Tampa Bay had a bunch of injuries and needed a wide receiver. And he's basically, we don't even know that Tampa's going to look like this same team next year. You had a bunch of guys on one-year deals. You have a bunch of, how did this team get so good? They stunk for so long. They had a bunch of top draft picks. They loaded the team up with a lot of great talent, offensive line, defensive line. They got guys like Ndamukong Suh for a year. They picked up Fournette off of the discard pile too, and Antonio Brown. But he played half a season. 400-ish some yards or whatever it is that he ended up having. And I just don't get people are like, oh, well, you're a bunch of haters. It's like, no, I'm just calling it as it is. This is a participation trophy for a crybaby who whined and finally got his way and happened to get a ring riding on the coattails of Tom Brady. That's exactly what it is. To see it any other way and to think that the Steelers were at fault and didn't pay this guy or whatever, I really don't know. You must have the good drugs.
Yeah, I mean, think of this on basically that first action where he quit on the team. Think about it the other way. What if Mike Tomlin just let things happen after he quit and he kept him on the team and things kept going? Like, what would that say about not only the integrity of his team, but the program and the city and the entire franchise that the Rooney family had built up? You don't even hear bad coaches. I'll even just put it down to some bad coaches put up with that kind of thing where you have a player quit on a team. You don't hear about that from any sport, any professional sport, really. It doesn't happen because it's not something that you do. And by that point, it was just really the speechless words because of people trying to think that some of us are just haters. Thank you for your service, for everything you did. He really did mean a lot to the Steelers. But after that, he was just gone. And really all of the stuff that people were talking about was just kind of validated when he went to the Raiders and he did all of what you just said there. And then he goes to the Patriots where he didn't even get a cup of coffee. He was handed the mug before it was taken right back out of him. Maybe he didn't even get the sugar before that, before Bill Belichick, the guy that's supposed to fix all problems, no matter how bad, he let him go right away. And then, you just get Tom Brady. It probably takes him down to the Buccaneers, and it's just kind of, he's there. He got to a guy that's the greatest quarterback of all time. I think that conversation is probably, we're going to get into a little more, but that conversation is probably getting a little more solidified. But it is what it is, man.
I don't know about a little solidified. It's a bitter pill to swallow. I think it's easier to swallow just because he's not on the Patriots anymore. But you bring up some good points with the coaches, but I wanted to go back to the Antonio Brown thing just a little quickly. And I know some people are going to still come back and say you're just hating. I was the biggest Antonio Brown supporter ever. I ended up, true story here, one of the Strip District specials when it comes to jerseys for two reasons. He had gotten the contract. I was one of his biggest supporters up front. They didn't have Antonio Brown jerseys readily available at this point. Bumblebee jersey with the 80th anniversary patch, right here, whichever side it was on. And I wanted an Antonio Brown jersey because that was my guy. I ended up having, let me see, I had a home jersey, I had the Bumblebee jersey, I had an away jersey, and I also had the block number jersey. The only one I didn't get of his was a Color Rush. I even have his one of the jerseys signed. If you heard my story before on this show about training camp, the year he went crazy, he grabbed my cousin's nephew there. And he's like, "Why is the little man crying?" Puts him on his lap right in the golf cart at training camp, signs the back of his jersey, and takes a picture with him. Who does that? He used to hang around for all the fans. He worked hard. He was on the jugs machines after. Peter King waited to do an interview with him at midfield after he got his jugs worked in. Talked to Peter King. His wife or girlfriend or baby mom and all his kids. Everybody's waiting for him, and he didn't superstar anybody. And I saw him do that a lot of times throughout the years at training camp and that. Granted, I'm sure he loved the attention. There's no doubt about it. But he also loved the fact that the fans loved him, and he gave it back. And I don't know what flipped the switch or what went there, and then he starts talking, whatever about everybody else. We remember the Facebook Live thing and all these other Ronald Ocean, all these other little crazy things. And then they start to add up, and this goes back to the coaching is, and this was a conversation I saw somewhere on the internet, as I would, and you brought it up. How long did Mike Tomlin keep a lid on this, and how much does that speak? Everybody was like, oh, Mike, before it was Mike Tomlin, man, he must be this mastermind to keep this guy's head in check and all these other things. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, he was a clown and he let this guy walk away. And Antonio Brown's 32 years old. If he plays another year in the NFL, I'd be amazed. He may stick around. I don't know. But we saw Jerry Rice hang on for many years, and not at the Jerry Rice level, or Randy Moss. Those guys probably played until they were around 35, 36 years old. Heck, Rice maybe even 36, maybe. I'd have to look. But Antonio Brown. So he left Mike Tomlin, left John Gruden, and left Bill Belichick. These are not Super Bowl winning coaches with tons of experience of dealing with, headaches on their teams and keep it, come on, guys. There's definitely, you got to put some of the blame on the actual person that is Antonio Brown, and to congratulate him for catching 2 passes against the Washington football team for 49 yards. Did have a touchdown, the one big play there. 33, was it 33 yards? I was trying to find it. I don't have it in front of me. 1 catch for 10 yards on 3 targets, and then the 5 catches against the Kansas City Chiefs, because he didn't play the NFC Championship game at all. So he had 5 catches for 22 yards. If this were the Steelers offense and we're talking about anybody, like some people are talking about Juju's not a number 1 wide receiver, look at how many yards he gets. 5 catches for 22 yards, and you're giving Antonio Brown all the credit in the world. Now, granted, okay, he had the touchdown, but it just seemed like this was, I don't know, the whole Super Bowl thing, it seemed like everything was tacked on for me. But a total of, let me see, how many, 8 catches. He didn't even have a full 100 yards for the whole postseason. And I want to point this out real quick before I forget, too. There's always that Mike Tomlin thing going around, and it's like, oh, well, he's only won this many games in the past, however many years, playoff games, and he beat Matt Moore and, Alex Smith. For some reason, people think Alex Smith's garbage, even though everybody universally said he was comeback player of the year, and they call him a game manager. He doesn't make many mistakes. But, hey, Tom Brady beats Taylor Heineke for the first game here, and then even very convincingly. I think if Alex Smith plays this game, Tampa doesn't make it out of the wild card round, possibly.
Sure.
And Washington, although they ended the Steelers streak here, they made the playoffs by not having a winning record. So you got to put all these things into perspective. If this was the Mike Tomlin meme, then Bruce Arians and Tom Brady beat a first-time starting quarterback that came from a D3 college, aging and now headed to the retirement home, Drew Brees, the following week. And then, I don't know, the referees helped them certainly with Green Bay. Oh, man, we'll talk about that with the Super Bowl. That's coming too, the officiating part of it. But I just wanted to put the bow on the AB thing there. And as far as Bruce Arians is concerned too, you've heard my stat on this. I'm going to repeat it one more time. 7 seasons, 8 years. He took a year off to go to the booth, 3 different teams. And it took Tom Brady joining for him to finally get his second playoff win against Washington. That first playoff win, an overtime victory, a 75-yard busted play, Carson Palmer to Larry Fitzgerald, and then he went almost the whole distance. 2 plays later, they scored a touchdown and beat Green Bay in overtime. That's the only other win outside of the season on Bruce Arians' playoff resume, and everybody's like, oh, they let this guy go. We're talking like 8 years later. I mean, okay, he got there, but it took Tom Brady, and they were at 7-5 before the bye. They were headed on their way. There was doubts. There was all this. The media was all over this team and saying that they might not even make the playoffs, and they still got in as a wild card. Just come on, stop trying to make these just dumb comparisons.
I mean, the when they kept talking about after the game was basically solidified, and they were saying that first that he was going to be the oldest coach I think it was in the Super Bowl period, but then he was definitely the first coach or the oldest coach to win the Super Bowl. I mean, that kind of sums up his career, where he's the oldest coach to win a Super Bowl. And you talked about all of the things basically he hadn't done in his playoff career. There wasn't much to get rid of in terms of Bruce Arians for letting him go. It's not like the Steelers missed out on a lot because he hadn't done much until the one Tom Brady walked in the door.
Mm-hmm. Well, 220 sacks is what Big Ben took in 5 years as Bruce Arians as the offensive coordinator. And he's taken 202 in the 9 seasons since. Of course, last year kind of a wash, so you got about 8 seasons and an extra game and a half there since he missed most of the 2019 season. That's the reason Bruce Arians went. And then Andrew Luck had his worst statistical season with Bruce Arians, a rookie or second-year player at that point as interim head coach of the Colts. Carson Palmer basically retired because of getting just tattooed under that same offense. We assumed the same thing was happening with Tom Brady. We saw Jameis Winston. And, there's 2 sides of this, too, because Tampa were saying, okay, they had all these players, good players and stuff like that. But one of the things with Tampa was last year, would they end up 7-9 and they missed the playoffs? Jameis Winston turned the ball over a lot, but that's because of the Bruce Arians offense. They were 7-5, and Brady had 11 interceptions, and he had only ever thrown 14, was the most he ever threw in a season. They still had, 4 games to go. You would think he would have been on pace to break his record with Bruce Arians' offense, and something changed. I don't know if that something was like Byron Leftwich. Lots of Steelers guys here, too. Larry Foote, Antoine Randall-El, there's a lot of guys on that staff. And, kudos to them. They still got the trophy. I can't take it away. We'll talk a little bit I got a little more specifics on that in a second, but this was a team that was in a lot of close games last year, and they grabbed a handful of one-year deals to put the team over the top. It reminds me a lot of like what the Rams did several years ago when Jared Goff was still on a cheap contract, and same guy. They got Ndamukong Suh in there, and a few others like Aqib Talib, and I'm trying to think Marcus Peters, I believe. So they tried to put it like it's a very short window and a short run, and I think the Steelers were kind of in that position this year, and yeah, they blew it. So what else can you say about that? I'm just trying to illustrate here is that there's two things here. Some people are like, did Tom Brady really just go to any team, just pick a random team and take them to the Super Bowl? No, because if he went to the Jets, I don't think he makes the playoffs. There's a lot of teams he would have went to that, and we saw that only so many had interest in him, supposedly just the Chargers and the Buccaneers and Bruce Arians. And Bruce Arians, man, he made no qualms about not wanting really. He would say Jameis Winston was his quarterback in 2019, but we knew that was a lie, and we knew Jameis was on his way out with the contract and everything like that. But Brady just didn't pick any old team, and he got some of his buddies to come in and help shore this up. It's not like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin weren't already solid players. You didn't get to see a lot of the guys that really do the dirty work too on this roster, like Ronald Jones, Cameron Brate, the offensive line, Ryan Jensen, Ali Marpet. Those offensive line, that was a great offensive line. Their defensive line, Golston, Veda Vey. They added Sue in there. At least their front anyway. Shaq Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul. All of this came through there, and quite a few of these guys, dare I say, Bruce Arians inherited from the previous regime in the same way that people try and say that Mike Tomlin inherited Bill Cowher's team too. So Brady just didn't pick any old team and everything like that. But I think there was some interesting stuff with the actual Super Bowl game that we have to cover here because the correlations still aren't there, Noah. We saw a snap go over Brady's head. We saw what happens when the offensive line is banged up or incapable of blocking all those guys on that defensive front seven that I just talked about. There's a lot of parallels with the Steelers, and you see, even though they have Patrick Mahomes and he could run around in next-gen stats, since it's been instituted, the most scrambling yards of any quarterback ever in any game, because he just kept running 30 yards backwards and trying to make something happen. And everybody says, you need a mobile quarterback, you need this, you need that. And I saw the Chiefs fail in a lot of ways that people think would fix the Steelers. And for me, I don't see that that's true. You commit penalties and defeat yourself. They handed it to Tampa Bay, who didn't make any mistakes, so it wasn't even much of a close game.
Sorry, I have to turn the mic on and off because we've got teachers. It's a teacher house, and they're teaching in the other room. I don't want it to come on through, but
that's all right.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the Bucks always had a decent team. Like even before Brady got there, you could see that they were starting to build a relatively decent foundation. They were always just under the middle of the pack. They had a really good offseason if you even take away Brady, but then you add Brady and then Gronk, and I think you even have to elevate Gronk just a little bit because of the guy passing to him and the chemistry that they've had over the years. And then you've got that kind of not necessarily a tornado, but this playoff basically pedigree from a bunch of those guys coming in. And then you've got the Kansas City Chiefs that had basically a game, like you said, where they pulled the Steelers from this year. There was just, I was looking at the stats just because it was just mind boggling with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, and it was, I think, I don't know if it's been fully checked or not, but I'm pretty sure this is the first game that they have not scored a touchdown, just like a touchdown in general, since he's been under center. Now he's had, I did find there were 4 games out of 56 in the past 3 full seasons that he's done where he hasn't thrown a touchdown. Only 4 games where he hasn't thrown a touchdown. And then I think this was the first game where the Chiefs in general didn't score a touchdown. And that, I mean, you could do an entire other podcast on the Super Bowl game itself and basically the Chiefs woes versus the Buccaneers starting to dominating by the end of the game. But I think that stat just kind of tells the entire tale without getting into too many details with, again, just how Patrick Mahomes did not have a good game.
Well, not only the offense definitely laid an egg, and Todd Bowles, defensive coordinator at Tampa, he didn't blitz a whole lot. They 3-4 guys, that's all they were sending, and they didn't have to do a whole lot. And then when they did, oh my goodness, it was so overwhelming. They were just overpowering the offensive line, and that was a lot of the parallels I think with the Steelers. And a lot of people go back and they talk about, well, Mike Munchak left, but you tend to forget that Marcus Gilbert was always considered a Pro Bowl level talent that never had that distinction or that honor actually placed upon him. And he was there since, 2011, and then started getting injured late in his career, and then they traded him, and Matt Filer was in there for 1 year, and then this year was Zach Banner got hurt in the first game, and Chuks Okorafor comes in for his first real meaningful starting snaps. You can't have it. It's not lost on me that Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, Alejandro Villanueva, those guys are all getting older. You move Matt Filer back over to guard. There was a lot of moving parts, and then those guys were hurt or banged up where you had Kevin Dotson at either spot at guard. And I thought he did well, especially in the run game when it seemed like when he was in there, they could run the ball. But this is definitely, you got to win in the trenches. They got the defensive side of the ball, I think, completely set. Whether Bud Dupree comes back or not, Alex Highsmith has shown he's capable too. And I think a lot of people forget they went 3 deep at that position, going all the way over to Cassius Marsh, who was on the practice squad with the 49ers just a month earlier before these Browns games. And then same thing happens at inside linebacker. You lose Devin Bush. Everybody was raving about Devin White in this game. There were the 2 Devins. There were people who didn't even realize, the Steelers passed on Devin White. No, they didn't. And in fact, it was either Devin you can get. It was pretty much pegged that Tampa was taking one of them. The Steelers had to move up in order to try and secure the other. I think everybody knew that. And I think coming out of LSU, they were thinking White might be the better one. White ends up going to Tampa. Steelers move up and get Bush. I think Devin Bush is every bit as good and on the same level, of course, when healthy. When you lose that guy, that's your defensive quarterback, your play caller, the guy with the radio, and then you go to Robert Spillane, of course, undrafted, but still, Spillane made some splash plays. He's a different style of player. Obviously, he wasn't a number 10 overall pick in the first round of the draft or anything like that, so there's a drop off. But then there's even more when you got to try and fit Avery Williamson, another guy, more of a run stopping type guy, almost more of a Vince Williams than a Devin Bush type player. Bring him in. He's only been with the team. He gets traded from the Jets. He's only been with the team like a couple of weeks and then has to start. And, there's a lot of learning curve. There's a lot of turmoil there. You're going 3 deep at that position. Marcus Allen getting tossed in there too because you need somebody who can maybe cover, and he's a converted safety to linebacker who hadn't played any snaps and been on and off the main roster at times over the course of his career too. So just, when people are talking about like Devin White and all this other stuff, just it's a short memory syndrome of what the Steelers had to deal with. When you're comparing these other teams, this is the team that won the Super Bowl. They did this, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, great offensive line. Oh, they should go get Leonard Fournette. I don't think Leonard Fournette does anything differently behind the Steelers' offensive line. And he didn't really do anything until the playoffs, and they were still rotating these guys in and out. How about this, too? Here's a stat for you. I know you saw this in the back rooms. Lesean McCoy, 2 Super Bowl rings in a row, and didn't play in either Super Bowl. I mean, now he had a great career. I can't take anything away from him. I wouldn't take it away from Antonio Brown either. He did a lot of great things for the Steelers, but it's still... You got a ring, but you didn't. What did you do for it? You know what I mean? Not a whole lot. It's, I don't know. You're part of the team. I guess that counts for something. It's kind of like if you were injured and got a Super Bowl ring still because you were on the roster. So, but hey, I digress. losing my train of thought here for a second, but that I'm just trying to compare some of the things that happened or that correlated between either the Chiefs or the Steelers. And of course, when Tampa Bay has that lead, the penalties that occurred, the officiating, this was something that was discussed in a lot of the pregame stuff, and I specifically heard Bill Polian, a former NFL executive, a good one at that, Hall of Famer, I believe, too, maybe. Bill Polian was saying, I hope they just don't let them play, and then you end up with a situation like with the Green Bay-Tampa Bay game in the NFC Championship, where all of a sudden you throw a flag that's completely out of place and inconsistent with the way that they had called the rest of that game, and ends up being a determining factor in it. On the other hand, we heard it at halftime, and I can't remember a season as much as this year. You were always having talking heads. You have guys like you and I that will say things about the officiating, but I can't remember ever them cutting the halftime of the Super Bowl and the CBS guys sitting there and talking about the officials being too involved in the game. Direct quote, I think Nate Burleson and Bill Cowher both said something about it. And they usually don't take pot shots at the officiating, and they did in this one. And I think there were maybe too many flags because, and maybe questionable. The one was like a tipped pass, but they called it a holding. Was it Mike Evans? And I'm trying to think who else it was. Yeah,
I remember. I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah, and that ended up being a conversion for a first down, and some of the other ones may be self-defeating. They're ready to set up for a field goal, and what was it, offside or whatever. But the point being, Kansas City's playing from behind, so on defense, what does Tampa have to do? Nothing. They don't have to risk a whole lot, even though they took a deep shot or two just to back them off. And on the other side, Kansas City just got pass happy, trying to jump right back in it as everyone thought that they would. It didn't end up happening, but some questionable calls that kept some drives alive and helped. We all know the Tom Brady factor. We all think that there's some cheating and stuff going on. I think to some degree there was a little bit too much of that with the officials, and then some of it was just Kansas City shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, like you said, it was a little bit of both, especially at least in terms of the officiating. I mean, when you get a lot of the probably more trolls on your end talking about how you talk maybe a little too much about the refereeing, even though it's a valid thing, it really does play a factor into the game one way or another. And it was, in terms of this specific game, it was almost as if the actual the amount of calls, it wasn't like it was even on both sides, or it was just poorly officiated on both sides, or they were throwing a lot of flags or no flags on one end or another. But it was just hard for Kansas City to get into a rhythm because both offense and defense, there was just a flag that kind of stopped the momentum. And there are multiple games this season, let alone the past few seasons, that you could reference for the Steelers games that they probably could have and would have pulled out if officiating had been called a little differently. And it's part of the game, and it's just hard for a team when Kansas City is just getting so far down, and then you've got the referees necessarily might not helping them, and then you got Brady on the other side, and it all just kind of adds up. And like you said, just correlating with potentially the Steelers this season, it's more or less like the Browns in just a little bit of a different way, just adding maybe more Pittsburgh mistakes at the beginning. But I mean, hey, also credit to the Steelers where they actually did come back and they were making it more of a game throughout the rest of the Browns game, versus the Chiefs, where they didn't score a touchdown. They scored 6 points in the first half, 3 points in the second half, against a team that I guarantee, if I don't know the specific stats, a team that probably averages 20 to 30 points on the higher end, probably one of the averages more points in the entire NFL per game, and they just laid an egg.
Yeah, they sure did. I'm looking for that right now. I was trying to see what their points per game were on offense. I'm seeing, well, we got 473. It's gonna make me do some math here. They've scored 473 over the course. I'm hoping this is a 16 game, so 29 and a half, if I've got it right.
Basically 30 points.
Yeah, basically 30 points per game. I'm not sure if that's tops. I would have to think that's among the tops in the NFL. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They weren't getting it done. By the way, the penalties: 11 for 120 yards against the Chiefs and 4 for 39 against Tampa. I believe the Chiefs had 9 penalties to 1 was the count at halftime, and that's what prodded some of the comments there at half. And, overall, the game, my thoughts, I thought the game was boring. It's not going to go down as one of the better Super Bowls. I thought, I don't know what they were doing with the Vince Lombardi thing superimposed on the little screen at the beginning of the game. And there were just some, even the commercials, and maybe too many of them. Maybe we're just down because of all of, a lot of people being shut in and stuff like that with the whole COVID stuff and that going on. It just seemed like the whole tone was a little off for the entire thing. It was nice to see fans there. And even in my head, and, I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, are they too close on top of each other or whatever? But a quarter of them there were all the vaccinated healthcare workers and whatnot too. But I don't know. Maybe it was too commercial. There was just something about it, aside from the game, just kind of stinking because it wasn't very competitive. Great if you're a Tampa fan or rooting for them or got money on Tom Brady and company, and not so great if you're a Chiefs fan. I got a couple of friends that weren't too happy. Still haven't returned some text messages even for that game. I wasn't trying to needle them or anything. I was just like, what the heck is going on? It was the same thing they would ask me, against Cleveland or something like that. So, but yeah, the officiating, as it has been. And, I get some people are already throwing out the first female official, and I think Sarah Thomas or whatever threw that one flag that I was referring to, but it's not her, it's not Carl Sheffers. This has been a league problem all year long where they hadn't been calling holding, and they let some things go, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, that's maybe a little too much. It's just, I think they got to get back to it. I don't know, maybe if some of that is pandemic induced too, where they're doing maybe more things virtually than they might be meeting in person or whatever their processes are at the league level when it comes to the referees. But they were supposed to have fixed this with full-time referees not too long ago, and I'm not sure that they actually have. So I can't even pin it on a specific crew or anything like this. We saw plenty. Obviously, this isn't the same crew that had that NFC Championship game with that, that was the bailout call at the end there that got Tampa into this whole thing. And, that's the way it goes sometimes. So I'm not trying to just completely rag or take away. Tampa wins 31-9 because Kansas City just sucked. And most of the commercials sucked, and I'll throw one out there. We put some of them on the website yesterday that we liked. There was just the Wayne's World one. I'm just like, whoa, I'm okay. Cardi B. Wayne's World is always like, like rock and roll, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper. I'm like, one of these things doesn't belong. But then I was like, man, Mike Myers and Dana Carvey look like they've had too much plastic surgery. They look like some old rockers. And I thought Dana Carvey, they should age them a little bit. I don't think they have the party in the back still going quite so much, but they do wear hats. So maybe they're more follically challenged like I am. I don't know. But man, there were just some commercials that, and that one was like in between for me. It just felt like it was out of place, but there were some other ones. I don't know if you found any that actually caught your eye, but it didn't even seem like any of those were fairly memorable. And even Bud Light, who cranks out a bunch of these, they just brought everybody back for like this compendium, almost like the Avengers thing where they're bringing back all the old people from different commercials and that. And even that kind of felt flat, almost as much as their beer.
Speaking of flat, the Matthew McConaughey commercial, I thought that was good. Matthew McConaughey one. And even then, I had to look up the commercials because it wasn't that memorable. I mean, I also feel like the commercials are kind of getting like every year they're just getting a little worse and a little worse. Either that, it's probably that in addition to our expectations keep trying to go up and up. But I mean, like Pringles usually has a pretty good commercial, and that was just like, I don't necessarily know what they were doing with that. There was just a lot of, like you said, it was a weird game in general, a weird Super Bowl with all the weird commercials. Because I know with the COVID situation, some commercials were going to try and go that angle to try and maybe not necessarily be as funny and be more of just like talking about things that happened. And I mean, just one quick thought for the actual game itself, wrapping up what you were speaking of. I like to clarify, we would both probably say if you replace the Chiefs for the Steelers, I think you and Brian both would say first, the officiating I'm sorry, I can't speak today. I
can't speak any day.
Exactly. Yeah. They did not create the outcome of the game. The Chiefs did not lose because of officiating. Absolutely. just a part of it.
Yeah, it didn't help them, but obviously they didn't do anything to climb back in. Like if it was back and forth, and then you go back to, because that was the play I'm referring to specifically with, I believe, the ball being tipped in the defensive holding was, I think it was Mike Evans. I can't remember who the other player was that was there. Tyrann Mathieu, I think, comes up with a pick, and that would have been a turnover right there. And instead it, drive keeps going and Tampa scores a touchdown off of it. I think the Gronk, one of his two, which is crazy to think about. He's somewhere in Lynn Swan territory. I'd retweeted that as far as yardage and stuff, but I'm like, how many games has he played in, postseason or Super Bowls? Quite a few. And Tom Brady's been in like 10? And there's, so let's talk about the logo for a second too, because we were making fun of that. They put the trophy like in the center of the LV, and you were trying to figure out, is this 55 or 54 or 56? Like it looked, the Super Bowl logo it's been generic for the last like decade. I have this really cool Steelers coat. I didn't want to sweat. I was going to like put it on just to kind of be like a smart ass here. And it has like, 3 of the logos on one side, 3 on the other it's a Super Bowl, almost like a Letterman's type jacket. Right. And those logos all look cool because they're all unique. They're all different. And then the rest of this has been cookie cutter. It's just like, they have a template and they just toss this thing in here and that's all it is. And I would hate to have a similar jacket where you can't tell the logos apart. But yeah, anyways, that's just another thing to throw in on this whole like kind of lackluster Super Bowl here. But yeah, that turnover would have been, I think that would have been very significant. But everything else, it's inconsequential because everything else, that played out there, this wasn't the only thing. This wasn't a Jesse Cottet scenario, for example, or a Joe Hayden pass interference with Alvin Kamara type scenario where you could point to one play and say that would have turned the whole game around. Maybe it would have. The game was a little closer. Then I think it might have been, 7-6, 7-3 or something of that nature at that point. But still, the way Kansas City played, they never really got back into this game or climbed back. So I think we can put a bow on the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Jesse Cottet was my first podcast with you guys.
Yeah, man.
What a podcast! What a podcast to do your first one with.
Well, let me tell you about that one. You were
at the game, and that's where I had to fill in for you with Brian.
Yeah, and I was right above the goal line practically too, about 15 rows up in that corner. And a lot of people still go back to that and say Ben threw a pick. People, like, again, selective or short memory, Eli Rogers' jersey is pulled out about 2 feet behind his back as the ball gets tipped. Yeah, he was almost disrobed with no call, and they hadn't been calling anything the whole game. That was the same game where Martavis Bryant had his arm pinned and caught a touchdown with one hand, and I don't think they threw the flag on that either. And he still caught it, though, and so did Jesse, but they just didn't count it. They had to go to this. They counted it, and then they went to replay and said, nah, we're going to cheat the Steelers. I'm sorry, I said it. They cheated.
And then they changed the rules because of that one play.
Yeah, and unfortunately, then you play the team that was your bugaboo because of the way the seeding ends up with Jacksonville losing Ryan Shazier that season. It's still very much a thorn in my side. They don't lose Shazier. I think they go to the Super Bowl that year, whether they win it or not. I don't know, but Shazier is a significant piece of that. They were all wearing the Dan Rooney patches with the 3-leaf clover, the DMR. There was a lot of emotionally charged season. Then losing Shazier on top of it, it didn't help. Not only emotionally,
so close to the end of the season too, where they couldn't even just find a way or find a rhythm to pick it back up before trying to make a run.
Couldn't trade for anybody either. You couldn't go out and get like an Avery Williamson if you wanted to shore up any depth. They grabbed Sean Spence, who was sitting on the couch for a month after being cut from Indianapolis, and he hadn't really recovered from the 2 years of rehab that he had on tearing up probably every ligament he had in his knee when he was drafted. He was a 3rd-round draft pick, and you never know. Like if he doesn't get hurt like that, maybe he's still on this roster and contributing and making plays. You just never know. So
and then the draft pick that we spent on Devin Bush because of Ryan Shazier could have gone somewhere else. And
it's a domino effect, and
it is. Yeah,
people always talk about injuries and stuff and how they play out, but definitely the Chiefs, did they not have a plan? Well, they lost. You had injuries at the tackle spots. Like, Eric Fisher wasn't there to play. Like, what are you supposed to, what was it, Achilles? That's a season-ending injury, even if it's earlier. Like, how do you compensate for that? You just
and I mean, what you guys even said as the defense was starting to get injured this season, usually the team that wins the Super Bowl is the team that's the most healthy, and the Buccaneers, not very injured, and they ended up coming out on top. And even the Kansas City Chiefs, their whole team wasn't too injured, minus a few key spots, and that could have been the difference. Honestly, it's just injuries, man. It's just this season.
Well, and it's not only that. Because then somebody will say, well, they went out and grabbed Tampa grabbed AB. Well, they were taking a chance that this guy would even stay off social media. I say there had to be something in his contract, or just keep his head in to be able to play like the whole season. And it was kind of a contributor, but really no more than Scotty Miller was. So these guys that were the veteran guys is who they really leaned on for the win in the Super Bowl. You could really see it with Gronk and stuff like that. But I don't know that it's a full 16-game resurgence type thing. But I digress. Going back to the offensive line in Kansas City, a lot of people are like, "Well, Stefan Wisniewski, they just let this guy go, and why?" Well, I think we saw it. They saw that this wasn't working. It wasn't a fit, and he's a veteran player. And here's a guy that they gave the respect of, saying, "Look, we're going to move in a younger direction, maybe with Kevin Dotson or whatever was said behind closed doors," and offered him a release to go somewhere else in order to play, because he was in his early 30s also, so. He doesn't have a whole big, long career ahead of him. So it's just something that they did out of respect to him. I don't think he ends up playing anyways. If he's, maybe by result of injury he gets in for a game. But I think that ship had sailed, and the Steelers realized it after they brought him in and saw what he might still have left in the tank. And then you see what happens in the Super Bowl. But moving on from the Super Bowl and talking about offensive linemen, finally, long overdue. And I got some pet peeves with this. It has nothing to do with Alan Faneca finally getting the nod. Okay, he should have been in over Kevin Mccoy and a few others over the last 3-4 years that have gotten in there. 7-8 time All-Pro, only missed 2 games his entire time as a starter with the Steelers. Paved the way for guys like Jerome Bettis, just Willie Parker, just an absolute beast and dominant player. The offensive lineman, whether Zach Meckler likes this or not, just not the sexy position that people are like, hey, this guy's a Hall of Famer. And you got a lot of trolls out there saying other people were more deserving. And we see some of the other Hall of Fame class. Okay, Charles Woodson, yeah, absolutely, no-brainer. Peyton Manning, no-brainer. Oh, by the way, Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl, that offense that scored the most touchdowns and all prolific, and they didn't get it done there either. And that defense, that was the no-fly zone defense too. The defense was also solid. So you could have, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and this still Patrick Mahomes, these guys, any given Sunday. This, I think the real problem is, Noah, and you and I talk a lot about other sports, probably more than other people do. This isn't like NBA Finals where you have like 7 games. This isn't World Series or Stanley Cup 7-game series, 5-game series. It's 1 game. So anything can happen in football, and a lot of people only remember it because of 1 game. They'll never remember the rest of the Chiefs season or the rest of any close games that Tampa played or anything like that. It just comes down to somebody holding the trophy at the end. You know what I mean? And very rarely in other sports you have a situation like the Cavs down 3-1 to Golden State and coming back and things of that nature. And then, of course, they get the brakes beat off of them the following year, 4-0 sweep. But, I think that's the main thing there. But going back to the Hall of Fame, there are people that were trying to say, oh, why are you letting this guy? And this guy, Alan Faneca, has been so long overdue, it was ridiculous. And I wonder, they were already showing photos with them getting their busts made and things of that nature. Some of this stuff was pre-recorded because of all the COVID stuff, and I don't know how they keep a lid or a secret on all of these things leading up to that Saturday night. That was pretty cool. But Faneca, long overdue. I don't know. Let's hear your thoughts on Faneca before I get into some of the other stuff where people are going to be talking about, like where Faneca should have been replaced by someone else.
Oh, it was great. I mean, this is the type of if you guys are on any of the video chat, you can kind of tell the age bracket of where I was. So this is basically one of the guys on those teams that I grew up starting to love the Steelers for, and this is a guy that really kind of epitomizes that type of mentality in those teams that were getting to the Super Bowl, with Bill Cowher on to Mike Tomlin, and I think this guy especially. I even have sort of kind of just the tiniest personal connection to my dad. Taught at when he was done, and he actually moved to the DC area, which where I'm from. He ended up moving to where my dad teaches, the school district that he teaches in. So he actually he's a band teacher. The kids were a little too young to get into band, but he got to see Alan Faneca at his school a couple times, and talk about it. One of those stereotypical offensive linemen that was just those really big guys, and then retires and then goes the complete opposite direction. He just is, I don't know how many pounds he's lost since he ended up leaving the NFL.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, and I was actually just typing that in. I'm going to see if I can't. Someone said he lost about 100 pounds here. This was an article back from weightandskin.com on September 19th. So let me see. He was up as much as 320 pounds during his playing days. If you saw him now, he looks like a marathon runner, a real skinny guy, almost if you could picture like Lance Armstrong or somebody like that. That's what he looks like now. But his
tall and skinny now.
Tall and skinny. Well, he was always tall, 6'4".
Yep.
I see it here. Wikipedia has him at 316, and there's another guy here they took in the first round in 1998, 26th overall. You can only hope that the Steelers might. We're going to talk draft, not today. It's coming, folks. All this team needs, free agents, all that stuff's coming. But there's like a potpourri of different topics to talk with Super Bowl and Hall of Fame. And you definitely have to mention a guy that went to the Pro Bowl 9 times. He was a first-team All-Pro 6 times, and then 2 times a second-team All-Pro for a total of 8 All-Pro awards. He was also named to the NFL 2000s All-Decade Team and All-Time Pittsburgh Steelers Team. Just unbelievable. 206 games played, 201 of those he started in. Unbelievable career. Definitely long overdue. There are some trolls out there, namely the ones from Cleveland, that want Clay Matthews to get in too. And it's not like an either or here. I think Clay Matthews is a guy that is long overdue. You take a look at some of the statistics that he's had, and we've got statistics to talk about too in our final comparison. We're going to be talking about TJ Watt here in a moment also. Before we forget about being snubbed for Defensive Player of the Year. But the other Clay Matthews, he played for an awful long time. I'm trying to pull it up here. 19 seasons, 16 of those with the Cleveland Browns, 3 of them with the Atlanta Falcons, played up to age 40. I think he was one of 3 guys, including James Harrison of the Pittsburgh Steelers, that played linebacker past the age of 38 or older. Let's see. Clay Matthews here, 248 starts. He forced 27 fumbles in his career. And I'm trying to see how many tackles, almost 1,600 tackles in his career and 69.5 sacks. I think when you compare him against some other linebackers of his era, eventually I think that's somebody that gets in, but they only allow so many. You see how long it took for Drew Pearson to get a nod, and a lot of people are still saying, well, Drew Pearson didn't belong. Look at his stats. Completely different era. The folks that are older than me who lived through those Cowboys and Steelers Super Bowl battles and still despise Dallas to this day, I get it. You don't want Drew Pearson in because we would rather have L.C. Greenwood in, who's another long overdue guy. You take a look at some of the names and how long it's taken them to just get in here, and now you at least have like this the whole legacy. What do you want to say? Legacy. I can't think of the word I'm looking for now. Is it legacy, or I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, but it's when they allow players that have been, I don't know, waiting 20, 25 years and really aren't near the top of the ballots now because you have the Peyton Mannings and Charles Woodsons that are coming down the pike here. So you look at a guy like Donnie Shell. He's one of the guys who got in, and that's part of the Centennial class where they just added a whole list of names that have been waiting and long overdue, and I think Greenwood's in there too. But yeah, so is Clay Matthews, but not in spite of Alan Faneca. Now, if you want to make some arguments about Megatron, there's a whole other thing there where, okay, Kelvin Johnson kind of called it quits a little earlier, but extremely dominant player. It's very hard to argue that he wasn't. But I think it's in the Terrell Davis kind of territory too, where how many other names does this open up for? Guys like maybe a Sterling Sharp who had a shorter career, or even guys statistically that are there that have maybe rules that are altered because of them, like Heinz Ward, that are definitely memorable players and are kind of in that mix. I don't know if that opens the door. I don't know if they allow more names on the ballot. How selective does it have to be? Are you watering this down? I really don't know. I think Megatron definitely belongs in there. But again, wide receiver is a lot sexier than some of these other positions. I think Clay Matthews will eventually get in there. Alan Faneca, long overdue. And one last one to throw in here, too, is a longtime Steelers scout, most notably the architect, kind of the guy who built a lot of these teams up and found players from historically black colleges, is Bill Nunn. And myself and Brian have brought up Bill Nunn's name countless times on this podcast. So to see him finally get his due, long overdue as well, in the contributor category for the Hall of Fame. So hats off to Bill Nunn, finally getting this recognition as well. And with the Centennial class and last year's class all being postponed, it's going to be a Steelers party with everyone. We mentioned Shell, Polamalu, Bill Cowher, now Bill Nunn, and Alan Faneca all added to that. It's going to be a party in Canton, provided we get to do it this year in August.
It's like you said, the Hall of Fame it's not very clear cut. There's some politics playing into it, and there's no written rules of like, oh, a wide receiver has to get in or an offensive lineman has to get in each year or something like that. But there's kind of more or less ways, and it's a whole political game. So it's not as simple as just Clay Matthews didn't get in because of X player, which happens to be people talking about Alan Faneca. There's a lot of other moving parts going into it. And I mean, that doesn't really take much away from Clay Matthews. I think if we were a Packers fan and we or maybe I guess not a Packers fan, Packers fan would probably say that he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer the whole time. But the average NFL analyst, probably he would be debated to be whether he's first ballot or not. And that doesn't mean that he's not going to get it next year or the year after that. It's just the one specific year. Like you said, Faneca had been waiting a very long time. And I mean, you could even you talk about Megatron. I know those Colts fans over there. I have to give a shout out to my Colts fan wife where she's talking about Reggie Wayne. Like, hey, when's Reggie Wayne going to get in with Peyton Manning getting in there too? Because you could argue that Reggie Wayne should be ahead of someone like Megatron. But there's a whole week. There's a lot of rabbit holes we could go down with that.
Oh, absolutely. Reggie Wayne, just 1,714 reception, or 1,070 receptions. So over 1,000 receptions, 14,345 yards, and how many touchdowns? 82 touchdowns. Definitely some great statistics, but right behind him, though, Heinz Ward has 1,000 on the nose, 12,083 yards, so he's about 2,000 yards shy there. 85 touchdowns. Let me see. I hate when they don't actually show how many seasons here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 seasons for Heinz Ward. I'm going to say it's almost the same here.
I think it is for Reggie.
14 seasons 14, for Reggie as well. So, Heinz has a couple of more touchdowns and a team that was more run-oriented and not as pass-oriented too. But, I mean, that makes the argument maybe for Ward. I do think Wayne is more deserving. I'm not going to lie. The eyeball test, he was just more receiver. But Heinz Ward for the blocking and knocking people out and doing it with the smile. And Heinz Ward got a Super Bowl or – no, he did. He has the Super Bowl moment. He doesn't have the MVP though. He was he? No. He does not have the MVP though. So, Yeah, Super Bowl MVP. That's right, Super Bowl
I think
XL.
he did. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
he was. Yeah.
I don't know why
The
I was
first
thinking
one,
Ben.
his first
Ben
one,
was
yeah.
it, but Ben was. A lot of people forget Ben wasn't as
No,
consequential,
yeah.
especially that first one. That was the bus's last ride and everything like that. Yeah, definitely. I had a supreme brain fart there. I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, Heinz Ward, because I was trying to remember the photo where Santonio was in with it, and I think Lynn Swann and Franco Harris or whatever, they had like a group photo, and they were all guys that were former Super Bowl MVPs. And, Santonio didn't have a long enough a career either in Pittsburgh or otherwise. He had that pause in his career too, where I think, if he had kept going, he was still doing well, even with the Jets. But he won't be a gold jacket type guy to make that same type of photo op, unfortunately. Let's talk about one more award, since we were talking awards here, and to wrap this up. TJ Watt did not get Defensive Player of the Year this year, and led in, I don't even know how many statistical categories as a defender. There's nothing against, again, this is another thing where it's like we talk about not being against Aaron Donald necessarily. Aaron Donald, definitely dominant player. It's two different positions. Some people are going to be like, Aaron Donald double teamed all the time, as if TJ hasn't been held all this time. And then he comes out, and how many strip sacks, how many fumble recoveries and plays of that nature, the splash plays. I mean, Donald getting to the quarterback,
he drops
too.
into coverage too. There are plays where he takes off to drop into coverage. Obviously not as much as he did a couple years ago, but there's still a couple plays where he does drop back into coverage.
Yeah, it's just, it's not that Aaron Donald wasn't deserving. I think it's more disappointing that TJ probably has ripped off two of the greatest individual statistic years of any type of edge defender. And it's not just sacks; it's everything else he does. An interception here, or pass deflection there, and the strip sacks and forcing fumbles. I think he had I don't want to speak. Just I'm coming right off of my mind, but there was one point there I think where he had half the games he played in, he had either had a sack or even a strip sack. And he has enough sacks for almost every game he's played in his career so far. And I understand it's a regular season award. That's one thing. People are going to say, well, TJ disappeared in the playoffs. Well, it's kind of the same thing when you're looking at the Chiefs, playing from behind. It's how much are you going to do? I'm going to run the ball at Cassius Marsh the entire time when he ends up coming in for Alex Highsmith too. I'm not going to bother with TJ Watt. And, he gets chipped by tight ends, and he's got running backs that are in pass protection, stuff like that too. So is his line of sight the same thing? Does Aaron Donald have to get up to the same speed? Or is he just, beast his way straight through everybody? Two different, unique, what do you want to say, elite players at their position. And right now, Aaron Donald has a little more history to say he's going to go down as one of the greats of all time and probably a first ballot Hall of Famer. TJ stays on the same trajectory here. He'll be in that same category as well. And if you saw it, the tweet right after that, he tweeted, this is all he put on his Twitter. It was the Michael Jordan Last Dance caption. It says, and I took that personally. So look out for TJ. He might be a little motivated to do this is scary. Bigger and better things. Even Zach Banner said, did you have to give that award out right now and basically tick him off? Now I'm going to have to deal with this in training camp.
Yeah. I will take all of the credit for TJ exploding because I got his jersey basically the week before he exploded last season and continued to explosion. So I'll take all of his credit for it. But,
the same way I take the credit for Antonio Brown when Mike Wallace left. So
oh gosh. But when I had heard that basically he didn't get the Defensive Player of the Year, I wrote last year an article. I was on the SCU side. I was the guy trying to publicly advocate for him to get the DPOY of last year, and there were that's a whole other conversation too. Even though that year maybe there was probably a little more argument for Stephon Gilmore to get that award, even though you could talk about how Steven Nelson had basically the same type of stats and he wasn't even mentioned. But that's again more
the
digressing.
Gilmore thing bothers me so badly, and there's some trolls out there who are saying, was there any other player that was deserving? And I said Xavier Howard, but he had 10 picks. I mean, that doesn't come along every day either. But Yeah, TJ, and I had it here. I don't know who made this little graphic, but it was he had more tackles than Aaron Donald. He had a sack and a half more than Aaron Donald. He had almost twice as many tackles for loss, 55. I don't know where they get the pressures from. I don't know if this was a PFF metric. So this is just going on whatever's been floating around social media. Yeah. Spare me the details, because some of this, I saw something ungodly from like Nick Bosa. There was a PFF graphic of him having 102 or 104 pressures his rookie year, the previous year. And it's like they have 55 and 42 put here. So I don't know which pressure category. Some of these places like ESPN or Pro Football Focus have their own like custom stats they make up. So I'm not sure where this is pulled from, but they have 55 to 42 here. QB hits 41 to 26. TJ had 2 fewer forced fumbles. The only category head-to-head he doesn't have more than Aaron Donald. 7 passes defense to 1, and also the interception, which is kind of rare for anybody who's rushing the quarterback. But as you said, what's Aaron Donald's job? He doesn't drop into coverage. Every single play, they're going to be like, well, he was double-teamed this percentage of plays. You can't put that up against TJ Watt. You remember he was on a wide receiver in the slot. You make fun of it, but then you tend to forget that his job isn't always to go after the quarterback. Now, the Steelers have been going after the quarterback a lot more than they used to in years past, which was one of my gripes with Bud Dupree and how everyone was complaining about his regression. He used to drop these guys into coverage a lot more. Now they kind of just send them because they finally got the secondary kind of settled over the last few years. But and it's like, if there was at least, I don't know, Donald's had this award already. I'm going to be a homer. I think TJ, I thought he was almost like a shoe-in, but you always have that they're going to screw the Steelers kind of mentality. I don't think it's necessarily that. You had some deserving players, but ever more so, and it's not because Aaron Donald went to Pitt. I'm not a Pitt guy. I'm an Ohio State guy. You're an Indiana guy. We don't care about that, really. So the hometown connection with Aaron Donald doesn't make it more palpable there. But it's I just didn't like, I don't know, Gilmore with the Patriots. Maybe that was it. But I just didn't think Gilmore had that much more of a special season compared to what. Now, you had Calais Campbell in that conversation, too, who was definitely deserving last year. I just think, at least with this one, Donald winning it, it's still, something that is upsetting. You want to see TJ get this accolade or this recognition. At least I can settle and sympathize and say, okay, Donald deserved this versus Gilmore last year.
I mean, I think this is just one of the classic instances where just the name brand player kind of wins out, even though that's not necessarily, I don't even want to say logic and go that far, but really TJ outplayed him this year in terms of looking at it without any biases from either side. He should have received the award. If you were someone that didn't know anything about American football and you were given what the rules are of the game and you would give them those 2 resumes, I'm fairly confident, putting bias aside, that person would say TJ should get that specific award for it. But it's not the way the world works. There's more politics than there should be. And there's just another year again that he doesn't get recognition that he should. And that's just the hard part. Like, if TJ got the DPOY last year or something, I might understand it a little more, or a couple of years, but it's something to where nothing has been recognized outside of his own teammates to where he's gotten recognition that he has now earned and definitely deserves.
One last thing for you here, Noah. Did you know today was National Pizza Day?
I did. I was teaching this morning, and I told my kids that they can tell their parents that today's National Pizza Day.
I thought National Pizza Day was on Sunday, though. They sell the most pizzas, I think wings also, but definitely pizza. The most pizzas get sold on Super Bowl Sunday, and it's just, I try, as much as I'm a big pizza guy, I love pizza. And where, my hometown, Youngstown, Ohio, they got a lot of people that came through, a lot of Italian immigrants that settled between Chicago and New York. So you got a lot of good Italian food, and specifically pizza shops in that specific area. If you ever cut through Northeast Ohio, stop there. But it's just weird that it's like 2 days after the Super Bowl. You would have thought, move it somewhere else or whatever. So folks, go out there and get your pizza. If you were like me and you waited because the pizza lines were too long, you didn't want to wait 2 hours for a pizza on Super Bowl Sunday, now you can go out there and do it for National Pizza Day. So Noah, hey, thanks for taking some time out of your day, and hopefully we get to do this a little more often. And we'll see what Brian's up to and if he's recovered and recuperated. One of these days, maybe we'll get all of us on here and we'll start. I try and stay out of your mock draft stuff that you guys are doing and everything like that.
I don't do much of the mock draft.
Yeah.
It's so much to keep up with. I'm like you. It's hard to follow that closely.
It is, and I've got some ideas for that. We're going to be talking about that here in the very near future because there won't be a whole lot else to talk about. We'll start talking about free agents and things that the Steelers can maybe do. We know there's a lot of guys that are, they got contracts expiring. We know salary cap things are up in the air, so there's still a lot of meat on the bone for us to talk about, and we appreciate everyone tolerating the off-season talk now. So I thought, with the Super Bowl, it was underwhelming. I'm not going to say disappointing. I had no, horse in the race there. So it's one of those things I watched, I tried to enjoy, and it wasn't anything that was, back and forth or anything that, it was kind of like by halftime, you're just like, I don't know. You're almost looking forward to the equalizer since they were beating you over the head with it premiering afterwards. It's like, I'll just wait until this is over and see Queen Latifah beat up on somebody. So anyways, thanks for joining me and thanks for joining us. Thank you, listeners out there, viewers on YouTube. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully, I'm beat, man. I'm tired here. I've been not getting enough rest and a little bit of the Super Bowl hangover here. So hopefully I articulated all of my thoughts. No real Antonio Brown hate here, just telling it how it is. And the same thing with Bruce Arians and everyone else. The Steelers, I think we'll be talking about their staff. I think they got some things in line here as well. And we're going to start looking ahead to the 2021 season. But until then, my name's Joe. His name is Noah Freeman. And we hope to have you back again soon, Noah, and for everyone else out there, we always encourage you to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.